Look at modern Zen from the outside, and you see the ultimate antidote to our chaotic lives. It's pristine, it's quiet, it's a perfectly lit room smelling of cedar where you can sit on a cushion and finally breathe. But if you look closer at how Zen actually developed in the West over the last few decades, that perfectly calm aesthetic often hides a small civil war. Behind the silence, many Western retreat centers have quietly dealt with deep institutional abuse, moral failures, and a profound level of spiritual confusion. To understand how this happened, you have to look at the world Zen entered. After the Second World War, the West was culturally exhausted. If you look at this congregation, you see a society that inherited old churches and moral authorities, but lost trust in their spiritual credibility. It was a culture rich in money and machines, but poor in peace. We built massive industrial economies with rigid, mechanical routines, turning human beings into gears on an assembly line. And perhaps most terrifyingly, science had reached a point where it was delivering modern medicine and world-ending weapons in the exact same century. That nuclear threat created a relentless existential dread. People desperately wanted a way out of stale religion without having to kneel before the old gods of their childhood. So, Zen appeared, but it didn't arrive whole. In Japan, Zen lived inside an entire ecosystem of rigid temple systems, funerary duties, and deep monastic training. That machinery was left behind. What crossed the ocean were the portable fragments, the robes, the chants, the cushions, and the posture. Western seekers grabbed these tools, never learned the underlying trade, and eventually mistook the outward performance of the religion for its actual function. This distortion began with what was easiest to replicate. Sitting meditation, or zazen, quickly became the absolute center of Western Zen practice. It required no heavy theology. You just needed to rent a quiet room, lay out some cushions, and tell people to watch their breath. Soon, the physical tools of the practice drifted from their original purpose. A robe can start as a simple reminder of discipline, but it easily turns into a costume of authority. A bow meant to express humility becomes a gesture of exclusive belonging. The institutions themselves encourage this drift. True inner awakening is incredibly hard to measure, and it doesn't always look impressive. So organizations naturally began rewarding what they could track: attendance, ritual competence, and whether you knew the exact right angle to hold your hands. Practice devolved into a kind of theater. A student might start sitting to confront their own suffering, but years later, they sit simply to be seen as someone who sits. The cushion becomes an altar to their own spiritual self-image. As Zen settled into the West, it collided with the rise of modern psychology. Retreats started incorporating emotional processing and trauma awareness. And while giving people a safe space to heal is undeniably vital, therapy and spiritual liberation are two entirely different disciplines. This diagram illustrates the stark difference between those two goals. On the left, we see the therapeutic model, gathering pieces to help a person's central sense of self become healthy, coherent, and stable. On the right is the traditional Zen model, an active interrogation designed to break down and dissolve that very construction of the self. But communities need members to survive. Over time, an invisible selection pressure took hold. Teachers learned to repeat the insights that soothed people and quietly discarded the harsh, destabilizing truths that made students uncomfortable. When a practice is judged by how calm it makes you feel, meditation shrinks into a mere stress regulation tool. Practitioners become emotionally fluent, but they are essentially just learning how to decorate their psychological cages, rather than doing the hard work of dismantling the bars. This focus on comfort created a perfect environment for unchecked authority. Early Western students often lacked historical literacy about Buddhist politics. So when foreign teachers arrived wearing robes and speaking with unfamiliar cadences, students projected deep wisdom onto them simply because they looked exotic. This reverence created a structural flaw. Arrows of scrutiny only flowed downward from the apex teacher. Without upward questioning, massive blind spots grew. Upward feedback was dismissed as the student projecting negativity. In this closed loop, silence stopped being a profound tool for attention. It became a weaponized shield, used by the community to protect the hierarchy from any real audit or accountability. So if you strip away the tasteful photographs, the therapy speak, and the unquestionable gurus, you have to ask, what is Zen actually for? At its core, Zen exists for one single purpose: to end our confusion about reality. It is a direct, radical, and frequently uncomfortable confrontation with the delusion that we exist as fixed, separate selves, standing apart from the world. True awakening is not cinematic. It doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt to give you mystical superpowers. It is the quiet, deeply humbling destruction of your most cherished illusions, a process that demands absolute ethical integrity instead of just a new set of darker robes. If this practice is going to survive and actually function in the West, the path forward requires structural honesty. Communities must build mechanisms that allow their leaders to be vigorously questioned, because unchecked power will inevitably warp even the deepest insight. There is an old, uncompromising rule in these traditions, the law of the field. Whatever seed you plant and water is exactly what will grow. An individual or an entire community will inevitably harvest what they actually practice. If you practice reforming, your Zen becomes theater. If you practice comfort, you will get comfort. But do not mistake the beautiful performance of calm for the end of your confusion. Just see clearly, let the falsehoods fall, and return to the actual work.